Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. We are here to reclaim the sacredness of all of them. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. Hey women, welcome back to another episode of the Moon Baby Magic Podcast. I'm really excited for today because we have the first episode of just me talking. And yeah, when I was reflecting on what topic I wanted to share with you all today, what came to mind was sort of the abundance of questions I've been getting lately for just like a basic overview of learning the phases, the seasons of your cycle. And yeah, I mean, you could dig through my old Instagram posts to look for that. And I do have an offering coming up later this year that's going to be a course, really bringing you into all the seasons and phases of your cycle. But women want this information and they want it now. And I don't blame you because when we're living in this world, kind of this, as I've talked about it before, 9 to 5 world or 24-hour clock world, understanding and living by your cyclical blueprint, it's like you kind of have to dig out that information for yourself. And I know I did. I am grateful to have found many sources that I look to really learn the different, the phases, how they correspond to the seasons, to learn what to eat, to learn how to exercise, to learn like herbs and supportive practices for each phase. And I really had to kind of like seek these out from a lot of different sources, which is totally fine and great because it was the biggest journey of my lifetime thus far and created such a fire in me really to bring this work forward and to serve women in this way by just sharing with them what's already happening inside their body and how they can attune to it. And what I've noticed from living cyclically is not only being more present with myself, but also being more present with the world around me. I notice the seasons now. I can notice the time of day and be in right relationship with the time of day. And I'm also much more productive. That's something I talk about often, is how living according to my cycle has really sort of healed me of burnouts. And yeah, we'll get into that more when we dive deep into the seasons. But some other benefits of cyclical living are like getting to experience the full range of your expression and letting go of resistance to that. I think living cyclically can also really help with PMS. If you feel like you're someone who has a lot of PMS symptoms, specifically mood symptoms, understanding your cyclical blueprint can really help ease some of that and help you just be in right relationship with that phase of your cycle. It's great for the people around us because they're getting to experience our fullness too. And I think that is such a gift. And it's also a gift for the girls because when we as women live in accordance to what it is to be a woman, to live on the rhythm of your cycle, the girls actually get a blueprint from that. And for me, that is one of the biggest gifts in this work, is the downward effect that it has on the younger generations, for them to maybe not have to seek out this information from so many different sources and maybe just see it in action in their communities, in their homes, in their families. So without further ado, let's dive into your cyclical blueprint. So as women, we do not live on a 24-hour clock as men do. That's the circadian rhythm. And although it is a part of our life, of course, we're going to be awake during the day and sleep at night. We also have what is called an infradian rhythm. And the infradian rhythm is basically what the circadian rhythm is, but instead of over the course of the day, it's over the course of your entire month. So It's really quite beautiful how so many things in our natural world, including women's cycles, can be divided into four. So in the menstrual cycle, we have the menstrual phase, the follicular phase, the ovulatory phase, and the luteal phase. In the seasons, we have winter, spring, summer, and autumn. As far as the moon, we have the new moon, the waxing moon, the full moon, and the waning moon. We have four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. There's so many fours. And I love this because what it really reminds me of is that as women, we are nature and we aren't just connected to it, we are it. I mean, if we think about it, like we have the wombs. And what do the wombs do? They bring spirits to earth. As women, we are really inherent to this natural rhythm. And yeah, I think tracking the cycle in this way really can remind us of how magical we really are and how magical it really is to be a woman. So, yeah, let's start with the menstrual phase. So, the menstrual phase of your cycle is generally like days 1 through 5. Um, it depends on how long you bleed. The menstrual phase is when you are actually bleeding in your cycle. So for some of us, this could be 3 days. For some of us, it could be 5 or 6. Generally, when we're thinking from an archetypal lens, you can kind of imagine yourself being in each archetype for about a week. So I sort of feel like I'm in my menstrual phase in an archetypal energetic sense a couple days before my period. So the menstrual phase is when you are actually bleeding. And when we talk about the cycle, we refer to this as the beginning of the cycle. So that's why I mentioned days 1 through 5, or perhaps you feel it again at the end of your last cycle. You can kind of energetically be feeling that downward energy. So when we think about the menstrual phase, that's a time when our hormones, both estrogen and progesterone, have dropped. And we're kind of in a lower place hormonally. This is correlated with the winter, the season of winter, and with the new moon. So when we think about winter and the new moon, they're both really times of quiet. The new moon, you can't see the moon in the sky. It's a dark sky. In the winter, there's not much plant life thriving and the animals go into hibernation. In our menstrual phase, to be in right relationship with that phase is to pretend like it's winter, even if it's not. And really, we're not pretending because that actually is what's happening in our bodies. And so the same rules that apply for winter or for the new moon apply during your menstruation. And that is eating warm foods to keep your body warm. You wouldn't want to eat a salad and a smoothie in the middle of winter, right? And the new moon is often a time of reflection, of pause before we set intentions for our next cycle. So on your period, that can really be a time to be in a reflective space, to do a lot of journaling, to do quieter activities, and really turn your arrow inwards towards yourself and let the rest of the world be quiet to you for a while. The archetype associated with our menstrual phase is the archetype of the crone or the wise woman. So you can imagine this woman as an elder. And this isn't just any elder, this is you as an elder. So one of my favorite practices for cyclical living that I learned from my teacher, Nancy Lucina, is to really flesh out these inner archetypes within you. So you might ask yourself, what does your inner crone like to do? What does she like to wear? What does she like to eat? How does she spend her time? I can share a little bit about my crone archetype, which I have named all of my archetypes, and my inner crone archetype's name is Lakota. So Lakota loves to walk barefoot along the earth. She likes to gaze up at the sky and see the hawks in the sky. She likes to wear long dresses and long ceremonial robes and a lot of earth tones. She loves sipping bone broth and eating warm foods. She loves a lot of quiet and really to just be. So when I come to the menstrual phase of my cycle, I know that it's time to be in right relationship to winter, to the new moon, and to my inner crone Lakota. The element that's associated with this phase of the cycle is the element of earth. And so this is a time of really rooting down. The earth is a stable, steady, sturdy element. It's not bouncy or jumpy. It's not trying to do a lot. Really, the earth element moves quite slowly. And so we can take comfort in moving quite slowly in this phase of our cycles too. To be in right relationship with the menstrual phase is really to rest quite a lot. It's not a time to start a new project. It is a time to reflect. It's not a time to exercise a lot. It's a time to perhaps take a slow walk, to take more naps. One thing of note is that sort of right when you begin to bleed, or maybe a day before, you do get this little mini spike in energy, which is estrogen. And a lot of women will act on that, feeling like I have all the energy in the world. And that energy is really meant to sustain you throughout your entire cycle. So really pace yourself. So near the end of your menstrual phase, you'll start to feel your energy rise again. And that is a sign that you're moving into the next phase of the cycle, which we know is the follicular phase. And technically, we enter the follicular phase the day we start bleeding, as that is when estrogen does begin to slowly rise again. But for clarity and understanding's sake, we do divide the cycle into these 4 phases: menstrual, follicular, ovulatory, and luteal. So once you finish bleeding, you'll start to feel that energy rise again, and you'll start to feel that follicular phase energy. So what's really happening in the follicular phase is follicle stimulating hormone is rising to begin recruiting follicles to develop, one of which will release the egg at ovulation. And this also in turn allows estrogen to rise. So estrogen is really the hormone that gives us a lot of our female energy in our cycle. And so the archetype associated with this phase of the cycle is the maiden. The maiden is a very playful energy. In our life cycle, maiden is the young girl within us. And even up into our 20s, and maybe for some of us, even into our early 30s, we will feel that maiden energy. And the maiden is really fun. She's characterized a lot by spontaneity. The maiden archetype has a lot of courage. You've heard, if you've listened to this podcast, a lot of women speak about the gifts of their maidenhood. In Rebecca's episode last week, we talked a lot about the gifts of really the healed maiden. And the healed maiden is going out into the world and really seeking what it is she wants. She's learning who she is. She has so much hope. When we think about the time of the day that this is the morning when the sun is rising. There's the possibility of, what is this day going to hold? What am I going to do? Who am I going to be today? And that's a really fun energy to play with. So this is a great time in your cycle to plan. It's when your research juices will be at their highest. You'll want to prepare, and it's a good time to really be in the details of things. Like if you need to work on a spreadsheet, it's a really good time to do that. My maiden archetype I've named Sunflower. And Sunflower really likes to go to the farmer's market and interact with all the people and kind of bounce around and not know exactly what she's going to buy. She likes to wear like a matching, colorful, or maybe even tie-dye set and be barefoot and feel the earth beneath her feet. She likes to start incorporating some fresher foods, fresh fruits and vegetables that are in season. And speaking of seasons, the season that represents this archetype, which you might have guessed, is spring. So really the rebirth, the new growth, the planting seeds. What is going to come of this cycle? What is going to come of this life? What is going to come of this day? The element associated with this time is the element of air. And the element of air is a lot to do with thinking, with our intelligence, and with swift moving action. And this is a really fun time too, where you can just be sure that your intelligence is at an all-time high in this phase. So some ways to be in right relationship in this phase is, again, to not jump in too quickly. We want to really pace ourselves as we come into this follicular phase, as we're still building up our resources after menstruation. Some good ways to really nourish yourself in this phase is to incorporate plenty of protein, at least 25 to 30 grams per meal, leading up to about 100 a day, as well as plenty of good fats. So good fats are like grass-fed beef, coconut and coconut oil, ghee, grass-fed butter, those kind of things, salmon, sardines. And olive oil can be an okay one. Olive oil and avocados can be sort of ones that you incorporate every once in a while, but you want to really focus on animal-based saturated fats in this phase, as well as some root vegetables like sweet potatoes and carrots can be really good. I'm famous for eating a sweet potato a day in this phase of my cycle. So next time you're in this phase of your cycle after your bleed leading up to ovulation, just notice what it is you feel. What do you feel like wearing? What do you feel like eating? Do you feel like hanging out with your friends more? Just notice and see what happens. So near the end of our follicular phase, you'll start to feel a shift. And this is quite a subtle shift, but from years of cyclical living practice, I've begun to notice it quite distinctly, where my energy becomes less air-like, less airy, less girl, and more woman. And this is the move from maiden into mother, which we get to experience every month in our menstrual cycles. In our larger life cycles, this is a big topic, and you've heard women on the podcast speak about it, that moving from maiden to mother really has an implication of really moving into our fullness and maturity as women, of coming into this more grounded, stable place where we're really doing things and not planning so much. And the ovulatory phase in our cycle really has that same energy signature. So energetically, you might feel a shift from planning and sort of sensual energy to being in whatever it is you're doing. You're in the full bloom of it, and maybe sensual energy transforms into more sexual energy in this phase of the cycle. So ovulation, of course, is only a moment in time when the egg bursts through the wall of the follicle. However, you can feel your ovulatory energy for a few days before and a few days after. So you might notice this for a few days before ovulation, and then notice it for perhaps 5 days after. You still have that heightened energy. Again, you're really going to feel all of these archetypes for about a week. And in this time, the reason ovulation happens is that estrogen hits its peak, and that's what triggers ovulation. So it is this sort of, you've built up enough resources in your follicular phase to then transform ovulation. And this is really the time of your cycle where you want to be in the doing of something. So if we think about the day, it's the height of the day, that full sun. And if we think about the cycles of the moon, this is the full moon, the illumination, the brightest day of the month. This is the time where you want to get on camera, if that's a part of what you do. This is the time to release something you've been working on, or put magical touches on it, as my teacher Nancy says. You might really enjoy social gatherings and spending a lot of time with other people and being out in the world. Your arrow really is facing outward in this phase of the cycle. So you might have guessed the season that represents this phase is the summer. So that time of really playing, of being out in the world where the fruits are ripe and you're going to barbecues and swimming in the water and being quite energetic. It's a really great time for that. And I tend to speak a lot about resting on your period, but I think it's equally as important to really utilize the full energy of your ovulation, because otherwise, not that we need a reason to rest, but I find that it just gives a little more intention to the rest. And again, you're being in right relationship with what your body is asking for. Your body is asking to do something at this time. Now, of course, if you're dealing with some hormonal imbalances, or chronic illness or an extended period of stress, of course, your ovulation is going to be disrupted. And this might not feel like it totally applies to you right now, but not to worry. Know that your hormones are extremely responsive. And with a little bit of effort into living into your cyclical blueprint, as well as perhaps one-on-one support from someone like me, you can come back into alignment with your cycle and feel robust in this phase. So the only thing we haven't really talked about is the element and the archetypal woman here. So the element is the element of fire, of course, that element that is spreading and lighting up and really just passionate. There's a lot of passion in this phase that can come through. The archetype, the woman that lives within you, is the archetype of the mother. So you can think about this as the woman who just really has full plates, like her career, perhaps, her children, her family, her social life. There's just a lot going, and she's able to really hold it all. My inner mother archetype I've named Gaia, and she has a catchphrase, and her catchphrase is, I can hold it all, including myself. And I think that really encapsulates this energy. So in this phase, I really enjoy being out in the world. I love being out and doing things. I don't like being home so much, unless there's sort of a lot going at home. But it's not a good phase to really get caught up in the mundane daily tasks of life. This wouldn't be the time to like deep clean your house. This might be the time to decorate your house, though. So the mother really likes doing magical things. And this is a great time, again, like I've said, to really come to fruition with something you've been working on. So putting those final touches on it and bringing it to the world, because you're really magnetic in this phase. And so it's a great time of abundance and manifestation as well. In your body, you're probably going to be feeling like you want to exercise more, and it's a great time to really push yourself. Unless, again, of course, like I said, you're dealing with some sort of chronic illness or stress, then you'd want to rest and direct those resources inward for ovulation. This might be a time too where you want a little more colder or lightly cooked foods, and it can be a good time to incorporate that if your digestion allows for it. Remembering that warmer foods are generally easier for us to digest in general. So you'll be in that ovulation high, maybe even for about a week after ovulation. And then after that is when we move into the luteal phase. And so from sort of a biomedical standpoint, the luteal phase is 10 to 14 days, and it starts right after ovulation. And if you're tracking your fertility signs, that's right after your temperature spikes. The reason your temperature spikes is because ovulation, which remember is triggered by a high of estrogen, ovulation itself triggers luteinizing hormone. And luteinizing hormone then causes progesterone to surge, and progesterone warms your body. Progesterone is a really wonderful hormone, and one that a lot of us women actually need more support with. Progesterone, you could think of it as progestation. It wants to heat the body to prepare for possible implantation. But even if you aren't trying to conceive, progesterone has a lot of really great benefits. It relaxes us, it supports our brain. And as Jessica Ash said at Matriarch Rising, a festival I attended last summer, she shared that progesterone really brings sort of a consciousness to the estrogen. So the estrogen is just growing, and progesterone says, okay, let's slow down and let's really see what is the purpose of all of this that we've been creating. So our luteal phase is also known as the premenstrual time. And for many women, this is when a lot of your symptoms will show up. So that could be something like bloating or mood swings, tender breasts. And all of this is really an invitation to slow down. Of course, there can be some underlying root cause with some sort of stagnation, estrogen dominance, something else that you might want to address, again, perhaps in a virtual session with me. But I think that the luteal phase is really an invitation to slow down, to start to rest before our period comes, not just crash when the period arrives, and to eat more and to eat more easily digestible foods. Our digestion slows during this time, and we're going to be hungrier. So really having lots of warm and nourishing snacks is going to be an ally for you here. And this is a wonderful time to up your self-care. So the element associated with this phase of the cycle is water. And so I love anything water related for self-care. Our emotions are very watery, so this can be a time of releasing emotions. Taking a bath is a favorite of mine during this time. Drinking a lot of nutrient-rich water, so mineral-rich water like spring water, or adding minerals to your water. You're also going to be more creative during this time and perhaps more in touch with your intuitive flow. The archetype associated with this time is the sorceress, also called the wild woman. She really is here to shake things up. So she's here to show you what isn't working in your life. This can be quite a challenging thing for some of us, including myself, who have a really strong inner critic. And there's a lot of ways you can work with that, including journaling and listening to her. And again, upping your self-care, taking the bath, doing the face mask, going outside, being in nature, swimming in wild water, things like that. But it's really also key to just work with that energy and sometimes allow it to be there. So the sorceress likes to show you what isn't working, and that can be a real gift in your life. Like I said, the progesterone bringing consciousness to the estrogen. In the same way, the maiden creates dreams and dreams and dreams. And the sorceress says, okay, and is this true? Is this actually in alignment with where I'm going? And so it really helps you make sure your arrow is pointed in the right direction. The season with this cycle is, of course, autumn. And I love this because just like the luteal phase and the sorceress are so dynamic, so is autumn, because in autumn, we really have this like shedding and the falling leaves and the release. Just like this archetype is associated with the waning moon and the setting sun, there's a lot of like ending. But with that shedding and release, when we think about autumn, in autumn, there's also a harvest. And so, really tuning in this phase to what are you harvesting in this time? What fruits of your labor are you harvesting? And what can you find gratitude for? Because there's always something. That can be a really great practice to sort of neutralize the inner critic if that's really intense, to just find gratitude. I mean, there's so much to be grateful for in this life. Just the fact that we can look out our window and perhaps see something beautiful is something to be grateful for. And in this phase, you really want to be preparing for your bleed again. So you might know I have your period prep guide available for $27. And that is a guide that goes into all of this much more than I can in the little bit I have left in this episode. But in this phase, you want to be preparing for your menstrual time. So perhaps preparing meals, doing any sort of energetic clearing rituals, cleaning your space. The sorceress loves to deep clean. Like you can really direct that shedding energy to getting rid of stuff you do not want anymore. It's a great time for that. And she can handle the details again, so the maiden and the sorceress are pretty good at the details. The sorceress, though, wants to be a little bit more creative. So giving yourself a creative project with no really end goal in mind is a great way to be in right relationship with this phase. You might want to start preparing for your period and your ovulatory phase because you have high energy, but I find that I feel okay doing it in my luteal phase too. And one trick I really love is to just make an extra portion of each meal for a couple weeks before your period, or even just a week, and you'll have plenty of food to eat while you're bleeding if you are the one who's cooking in your family. So those are the 4 women that you get to embody every month, and their seasons, their moon phase, their elements, and their time of day. And so now that you have this information, I encourage you to really play with it. And yeah, just allow yourself to embody all of these women. And right now I'm realizing I didn't share my luteal phase archetype, so I'll do that quickly so you can get a feel for this practice as well. So my luteal phase archetype is Raven. That's my inner sorceress. And Raven is very edgy. She wears like all black and this like orange kimono thing I have, which makes her feel very magical and witchy. Raven really loves to do all of my herbal projects. So whenever I open up my herbal shop, Raven is the one who has made all of that medicine. She likes to go for long walks in the forest, and she really likes to just be very honest. I've learned to love this archetype because it feels like my true north. It feels like there's no faking, there's no people pleasing. It's just really authentic truth here. And if you listen to my podcast episode, From Fitting Into Standing Out, Alex Dahl's story, you'll hear us share a little bit more about really the magic of this phase. So you can tune into that episode for more womb wisdom on that. All right, so back to wrapping this up. I encourage you to really tune in each phase of your cycle and see if you can flesh out who each of these women within you are. Don't worry if it takes a couple of cycles. It can. You're learning this. It's like a new language. But see if there's perhaps one activity, food, self-care practice that you want to implement in each phase. And see how that changes your life to truly live in alignment with what's already happening. Because remember, you're not making this up. You're not just pulling this out of thin air. This is already happening within your body. You're just bringing consciousness and awareness to it now. And of course, if you need deeper support, I'm always here. Your period prep guide is available, and I'm available for one-on-one sessions to go deeper as well. Let me know how cyclical living goes for you. And thanks so much for tuning into this episode. It's been so sweet to share these teachings with you. And if you have a sister who doesn't know about this information yet, share this with her. This is our chance for us to reclaim the inherent sacredness of womanhood. Thank you for being here. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly an honor to bring these stories forward, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it can reach even more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can find the link to book a one-on-one virtual session in the show notes. See you next week.